In this video, I'll introduce you to a few aspects that you should consider when you want to put your application out there into the world. The first thing to consider is the Android version. In our example, we're using a sensor which isn't available in earlier Android versions. So it's a sensible thing to do to clock the target version in at Android 2.3.1. Within Eclipse, that's set up in the project properties. So you can right-click on the project, go to Properties, and then look at the category Android, and there you have the build target. The golden rule is to aim as low as possible. If all the functions you use work also on Android 1.5, fine, click that. If you're accessing Google Maps, be sure to pick one of the Google API versions. It's usually not necessary to aim at a specific device, unless the manufacturer provides a few extra APIs. The second thing to consider is the minimum API level. I cancel this dialog and double-click on Android manifest.xml. Then click on the tab Manifest. Here you can find a Users SDK element with a min SDK version of 7. This essentially means that for earlier versions of Android, like Android 1.5 and 1.6, your app simply won't show up in the market. So again, provide an Android target version that covers all the functionality you want to have, and aim at a min SDK version as low as possible. Every time in your code you're trying to use some function that's specific to higher Android versions, you'll need to check with the availability. That way, you can create your app so that it uses cutting-edge functionality on newer devices, but doesn't fall apart on older devices. Another thing to look at is the feature set of your application. If, for example, your application relies on NFC, but doesn't provide anything more on functionality, you may want to clarify that in the Android manifest. On the Manifest tab, you can click on Add, select Users Feature, click on OK, and enter the name of the feature your application depends upon. So click into the name field. So for example, if your application relies on NFC, you would enter android.hardware.nfc. And if your application really relies on this, you would set required to true. And as soon as you publish this application to the market, it will in fact only show up on devices that have NFC. So this is something that helps you narrow down the audience if you have specific functionality in your application. And this will also keep users with devices without the required functionality from getting frustrated and bashing your application with a 1-star rating. But since we don't need this restriction in our app, I remove this restriction and click on Remove. If you want to learn more about the topic, I suggest you go to developer.android.com and have a look at the dev guide. Here you'll find the left pane on the framework topics, the category, the Android manifest.xml file. And here again, you'll find everything you need to know about Users Feature. This also gives you a list of the names of the features you need to provide. So for example, if the application uses the camera, you can provide this, and so on and so on. This doesn't only count for hardware requirements, but also for software requirements, like for example, voice over IP. So try to strike the right balance between as broad an audience as possible without frustrating a user which can't really use your application.